Right now, more than 13 million people in the UK live in what's being called a dental desert, an area where they simply cannot get an NHS dentist. 1 in 4 adults in England can't access one at all. In some places, fewer than 1 in 5 NHS-listed practices are even accepting new NHS patients. And yet at the exact same time, dental practices are being bought and sold across the country for anywhere from 4 to 12 times their annual profit. And private, fully cosmetic clinics are among the fastest growing small businesses in the country. So which is it? Is dentistry a broken public service or a genuinely attractive business to own? The answer, as you're about to see, is both, and the line between them comes down to a single 3-letter unit almost no patient has ever heard of. There are really 3 versions of this business. The NHS-only practice. Nearly all its income comes from a fixed annual NHS contract, predictable in theory, but entirely dependent on a formula the practice doesn't control. The mixed practice, the most common model on the high street, a base of NHS patients alongside private work, whitening, Invisalign, implants, cosmetic treatment. The private side often has to prop up the NHS side, the fully private practice. No NHS contract at all. Free to set its own prices, but competing purely on reputation, location, and the patient's ability to pay out of pocket. Ownership itself splits the same way. Many dentists work as associates, self-employed, paid per unit of NHS work delivered, or a percentage of private fees with none of the financial risk of owning the building or the contract. The practice owner is a different animal entirely. They hold the NHS contract, employ the staff, carry the debt, and absorb whatever the contract does to their income, good or bad. Here's the part almost no patient ever sees. NHS dental work isn't paid per procedure. It's paid in units of dental activity. You notice UDAs. Every course of treatment falls into a band. A checkup is band 1, worth 1 UDA. Fillings or extractions are band 2, worth 3 UDAs. And crucially, it doesn't matter if that's 1 filling or 7, the patient pays the same charge and the practice earns the same 3 units. Band 3 covers crowns and dentures. The patient's charge is fixed nationally. Currently £27.90 for a checkup, £76.60 for any amount of band 2 treatment, £332.10 for band 3. But what the practice actually earns per unit is negotiated individually, contract by contract, and has historically ranged anywhere from roughly £15 to over £40 per UDA, depending on where and when that contract was struck. That gap is the whole business model. Dentists in the profession call it swings and roundabouts. A quick simple filling earns the same 3 units as a long complicated one. Some patients are profitable. Some cost more in chair time than their unit is worth. The practice is betting the average works out. And for the last decade, dentists say it increasingly hasn't. Every NHS practice signs up to deliver an annual number of UDAs, fall short of 96% of that target, and the NHS doesn't just withhold the missing units, it claws back money already paid. Go over the target, and in most cases the practice generally isn't paid extra for it. That's a one-way pressure valve. It punishes under-delivery hard and barely rewards over-delivery at all, which is exactly why dentists describe themselves racing against a UDA target with very little upside for going faster and real financial penalty for going slower, even when the reason is something completely outside their control, like patients not showing up. One Bristol dentist put it plainly to the BBC. Any private work the practice does ends up subsidising the NHS side, because NHS work on its own runs at a loss. That's not a fringe complaint. It's become one of the most common reasons dentists give for cutting back on NHS contracts altogether, or dropping them entirely in favour of going fully private. Put the UDA system and the clawback risk together, and the pattern behind the dental desert headlines becomes obvious. In 2020-21, England lost almost 1,000 NHS dentists. The following year, that more than doubled to over 2,000 leaving. With one full-time dentist typically covering around 2,000 patients, that scale of exit can leave millions of people without access almost overnight. And it isn't spread evenly. Analysis from the Local Government Association found no local authority area in England has more than 1 NHS dentist per 1,000 residents anywhere in the country. And the gap between the best and worst served areas is enormous, with somewhere like the City of Westminster having over 6 times the NHS dentist density of the worst affected area. Rural and deprived areas consistently come off worst, which matters because those are also the areas where private top-up income, the thing propping up the NHS side of a mixed practice, is hardest to generate. The result is a two-speed system. Practices in wealthier areas can lean on private income to make the NHS contract viable, while practices in poorer or rural areas have no such cushion and are the ones most likely to hand back their NHS contract altogether. There is a genuine reform underway, and it starts on April 1st, 2026. The changes introduce fixed fee pathways for complex high-need patients instead of forcing them into the same flat UDA bands as everyone else, better recognition for preventive work, and a new £75 payment for urgent care, replacing the old system where urgent slots were worth a flat 1.2 units, regardless of how disruptive or unpredictable that work actually was. Practices with contracts of 100 UDAs or more will also be required to dedicate a set share of their contract, 8.2%, specifically to unscheduled urgent care. But the profession's own negotiators have been careful about how they frame this. The British Dental Association has been explicit that these are meaningful improvements, but certainly not the final destination. The changes still operate entirely inside the existing UDA framework and current overall budget rather than replacing it. Their stated goal remains phasing out UDAs altogether, not adjusting the bands within them. For anyone thinking about buying into NHS dentistry today, that framing matters. Valuers are already starting to price NHS contracts differently based on how a practice can actually deliver the new high unscheduled care requirement without destabilizing its routine, higher margin work, meaning the reform is reshaping practice valuations before it's even reshaping dentists' day-to-day income. Scenario 1. Buying an NHS-heavy mixed practice in a mid-sized town. Dental practices typically sell for a multiple of adjusted EBITDA. Scenario 2. Buying or building a majority private high-value practice. Practices offering implants, Invisalign and cosmetic work step back, and the shape of this business is unmistakable, a service that 13 million people in this country currently can't access at all, sitting inside a payment system engineered around an average that increasingly doesn't hold. An evaluation market that already knows exactly which side of that system it wants to be on.